Hi, welcome to Asia in Review at ThinkTech Hawaii, coming to you from Pioneer Plaza at downtown Honolulu. I'm your host, Hong Jiang, Associate Professor of Geography from University of Hawaii at Manoa. And today, joining me in the studio is my guest, Dr. James Cook from University of Pittsburg, visiting at University of Hawaii at Manoa. And our topic today is China's river and air runs black. Dr. James Cook, not the James Cook, the British explorer, it's James A. Cook, is Associate Director at the Asian Studies Center at the University of Pittsburg. And he is visiting the University of Hawaii at Manoa this year as the Arthur Lynn Andrews Chair in the Asian and Pacific Studies. And his research involves studies the impact of overseas Chinese on the development of mainland China and also Chinese environmental issues, especially in northwestern China. And Dr. Cook, so great to have you joining us.
Thank you very much.
Maybe you can just explain a little bit to our viewers about this title, China's River and Air Runs Black. I know it's very grim.
Yes, well, the title was essentially taken from Elizabeth Economy's very famous book, The River Runs Black, where she, of course, analyzes and looks at the issues of water pollution in China. And, of course, over the past year or so, the news that we've been receiving from mainland China on air pollution issues has been equally grim. And so I thought it might be a good idea and a little bit provocative to combine these two issues in one discussion.
One thing I'm reminded. I think a Elizabeth Economist book was around 2000, and at that time the river was black, and I wonder whether now it's blacker.
I don't think it could get any blacker, but I think what we can say are that more rivers are perhaps black. You know, one of the issues, and we'll talk about that later, is that probably 56% of all of China's rivers today are at extremely high pollution levels. And so perhaps the problem has magnified itself.
Wow. Let's start with the air because that's what we hear so much about.
Sure.
Just recently, I want to quote one of the Router report, which is on the air pollution in Harbin, which is my hometown, way back. And this was October 21st, and it talks about choking smog all but shut down one of northeastern China's largest city on Monday, forcing schools to suspended classes and talk about all the problems there. And index measuring PM 2.5, which is a particulate matter with a diameter of 2.5 micrometers, PM 2.5, reached the index of 1,000 in some parts of Harbin. And apparently the level 300 is considered hazardous, and World Health Organization recommended a daily level of no more than 20. I mean, just looking at those numbers. And I do have relatives still in Harbin, and talking with them on the phone, they couldn't get out. So tell us about basically just this general situation of air pollution in China. What's going on there?
Well, I've been visiting and working in China since 1991, and the very first time I went to China, there were few to little cars on the road. Most of the time you encountered bicycle accidents rather than automobile accidents, and even at that point in time, the level of pollution because of heavy industry and the use of coal, particularly within energy production, was already becoming an issue. Now, we fast forward 2 decades later, and now we find that with the rise of the Chinese middle class, we see that more and more people are using automobiles rather than bicycles to get around. When I was a student there, I would bicycle my way all the way from Beijing University down to the Forbidden City. That would take me about an hour and 10 minutes. Today I would not dare to do that journey because it would just be too dangerous.
You have to breathe, right?
Well, you have to breathe and you have to worry about the poor driving skills of many new Chinese drivers.
Wow.
But when we begin to look at the air pollution issues, we have to keep in mind that there are two main factors that are causing the issues with the air pollution numbers that you're seeing. And you're quite right in pointing out that many of China's, particularly its northern cities, is facing extremely hazardous air conditions. In January of this year, the New York Times and many newspapers, of course, reported that in Beijing they were reporting hazard levels of up to 700, which they labeled as crazy bad. As you pointed out, generally above 200 is viewed as hazardous, and above 300 is extremely hazardous to human health.
And let's let's bring up the first map, please. So this is probably something you can refer to.
Right. And so as you can see, the air pollution levels have been slowly but steadily rising within China, and this has generally been caused by China's dramatic economic growth. We see essentially a number of factors coming together here. One, obviously the increase in the number of automobiles on the street in cities like Beijing or Shanghai or Xi'an or even Baotou. And then secondly, the massive urbanization of Chinese society. And as you move people from rural areas into urban areas, you're going to need more energy. And that includes not only for the daily necessities of life, but also for the construction of these new megacities that are building within China, and the pollution that is also released within that construction process as well. And then finally, of course, you have the use of coal as the major carbon fuel for China's energy needs. Today, China is now the world's largest producer of bituminous coal, with production now reaching over 1 billion metric tons since 1989, and was over 3 billion metric tons last year. And so what we've seen as a result of these factors is that the particulate emissions within China has increased quite rapidly, reaching around 17 million tons, and sulfur dioxide reaching about 25 million tons. These are today the highest levels within the world. Wow. And unfortunately, India is not far behind. But you know, we don't want to paint a picture where all of China's cities are facing these issues. We know there is a great variance between cities, particularly in the north, where you'll see high levels of pollution, and cities in the south. For example, just recently I visited the city of Zhejiang, which is located on the Yangtze River, and its pollution index was less than Pittsburgh.
Oh, wow.
Yes.
So you do have some beautiful places.
Certainly,
still.
certainly.
Yeah.
So we want to be careful to try and understand what are the local conditions that are contributing to these factors. We have to keep in mind that China is big as all of Europe, and so there is regional variation that is occurring. Unfortunately, even some of the southern cities, like Shanghai, reached a pollution index level just yesterday of 300, and that too is a major contributor.
The areas less polluted would be more like smaller cities without a lot of industry, and also rural area. Large areas of China are still rural.
Correct. And of course, coastal cities tend to also have better air quality conditions as well.
And my understanding is that in general, Chinese cities, a lot of those cities are huge. We're talking about small city would be like 4 million.
Right.
And versus like here in Honolulu, if it's less than 1 million, we still call it a city.
Correct.
So it's a different scale.
Correct.
And a lot of people are living there.
Right. For example, Beijing is as big as Belgium, a country in Europe.
Can you talk a little bit about the health effect of air pollution?
Sure.
I know a lot of people are starting to, take measures and air filters and
Sure.
try not to get out.
Well, of course, what we see occurring in China has occurred in other places and at other times in world history. For example, Japan, South Korea, even the United States. We all went through phases of industrial air pollution. I think China's case is magnified by the sheer population numbers of 1.2 billion. What I think we're seeing, first of all, is issues with chronic lung cancer. This, of course, is due to the exposure of the particulate matter. And we have to keep in mind that the finer particulate matter is more dangerous to humanity than the larger pieces. And that's because that can get farther into your lungs and cause more devastating problems.
Is that where the PM 2.5 come in?
Correct. For example, Beijing only measures PM 10.
That's larger.
Which is
sizes.
larger. And Beijing argues that when we measure PM 10, we see actually China's air quality has perhaps improved a little bit. The United States Embassy has its own measuring facilities within the embassy compound and uses the 2.5 standard.
I understand they actually put it on the iPhone.
Yes.
People can
In
download.
fact, I've talked to a number of my old professors at Beijing University, and I say, where do you check your pollution index? And they said, oh, the American Embassy. So that tends to be a little bit more reliable. But getting back to disease issues, we now estimate that probably 25% of all deaths respiratory deaths are related to lung cancer.
Wow, that's huge.
Yes, and that's about 5 times the average here in the United States.
Wow, so it's basically the air pollution is hitting everybody, rich or poor, powerful or not powerful.
That is correct. That is correct.
Yeah.
And then, of course, the folks who are most susceptible to these issues are the children and the elderly. And there, of course, we see bronchitis and asthma increasing rapidly. Childhood asthma also becoming a major factor. And so the level of air pollution has now reached a critical level where it is beginning to certainly affect the lifestyles of urban residents.
I want to come back to Beijing just a little bit. Producer, can we have the image number 3? And you can see that is the Beijing in the haze.
Yes, yes. This was a photo taken during the January air pollution levels. Now, I know you've spent considerable amounts of time in Beijing as well, and generally when we see images like this, we're reminded of the very serious sandstorms that would engulf the city quite often in the springtime. When the monsoon weather patterns would blow large amounts of air from Siberia down into the South China Sea, picking up dust on the Gobi Desert and China's Inner Mongolia areas, bringing it into Beijing and making it look like this. This was not caused by a sandstorm. This was caused essentially by the tremendous amounts of air pollution that are being emitted essentially by automobiles. Despite Beijing's attempt to clean up the city in the face of the Olympics,
that's what it's going to be.
And it did fairly well there for a few
Right
years,
at
in
the
my
time, right?
opinion.
Yeah.
Yes, that these issues have returned, perhaps with an even greater hostility than before.
Wow. So we're going to take a short break.
Sure.
And this is Asia in Review at ThinkTech Hawaii, coming to you from Pioneer Plaza at downtown Honolulu. We've been talking about China's river and air runs black. We will be right back.
We want to thank our underwriters.
Hawaiian Electric Company and its affiliates Maui Electric on Maui and Hawaii Electric Light Company on Hawaii Island are deeply committed to the communities they serve.
Galen Ho is a senior executive of BAE Systems, a global defense, security, and aerospace company.
The High-Tech Development Corporation, the state's leading technology agency, attached to the Department of Business, Economic Development, and Tourism.
Castle and Cook Hawaii, with a time-honored legacy that spans more than 160 years and revolves around its mission of investing in Hawaii, creating communities, and providing for the needs of our state.
Hawaii Gas, formerly the Gas Company, a proponent of the Liquefied Natural Gas Initiative, helping Hawaii achieve its transition to clean energy and a better energy future.
Collateral Analytics, a Hawaii-based tech company empowering the real estate industry with greater and faster access to the tools and data they need to make better informed property investment decisions.
I'm Nicole Horry. Thanks so much for joining us on ThinkTech.
I'm Maria Kashem. See you next time.
Hi, we're back. We're live, and this is Asia in Review at ThinkTech Hawaii, and I'm your host, Hong Jiang. And we've been speaking with Dr. James Cook from University of Pittsburg about China's environment, China's rivers and air runs black. And so, producer, maybe we could start with image number 2. We were just talking about air pollution. Can you, Dr. Cook, tell us about this photo over here?
Sure. What you're seeing in front of you is a satellite image of Beijing during the height of the January 2013 air pollution problems. And as you can see, the city and its neighbor Tianjin were both completely engulfed during this point by the massive amounts of choking air pollution. And unfortunately, this has become an increasing occurrence in the lives of many of the people of Beijing.
I suppose in the wintertime it's especially bad because of the heating system, especially still using coal, right?
That's certainly the case. Beijing has been moving quite rapidly to phasing out coal and its use within private homes and moving towards natural gas. And they've been quite effective in doing that. Of course, when I was a student there, we'd see people driving around with carts selling charcoal for the brazier, but no, that's no longer the case.
When were you there in?
First time was 1991.
1991. Wow, things are changing so fast.
Yes, they are.
I was leaving China right then. Yeah. Water. You know, we look at the air, look at water, and can we bring up a producer? Can we bring up photo number 4? And that is water.
Yes.
Quite different.
Yes. Yes. Unfortunately, as you can see from this photograph, China's river system is facing dramatic challenges. They now estimate, as I mentioned earlier, that somewhere around 54% of the water in China's 7 main rivers is now deemed unsafe for human consumption. And this problem has actually been increasing since Elizabeth Economy's book that was written in 2000. In fact, over the past decade, we've seen a 12% increase in the amount of water that is deemed unsafe for human consumption here. Now, we have to keep in mind that both the air and the water pollutions have essentially been caused by many of the same issues, and this has to do with rapid urbanization on the one hand and rapid industrialization on the other hand. The industrialization issue, of course, is the one that in many ways started all of this. China's economy has generally grown around 8 to 9% per year. And this has had a startling effect on China's overall integration and structure. On the one hand, we know that China has seen over 400 million people have been lifted out of poverty as a result of this economic development. And from 1979 to around 2005, China moved from 108th to the 72nd place on the World Development Index. So this has led to dramatic changes in the lives of the Chinese people. Now, as a result of this industrialization, we've also seen rapid urbanization as well. And when I first started going to China, they estimated that somewhere around 70% of the Chinese population lived in rural villages. Today, that number is around 40% and is dropping quite rapidly. And this means essentially that the number of people who have moved from rural villages to cities is equal to the entire population of the United States.
You know, anytime we talk about China, we're talking about huge numbers.
Right.
Even if the percentage is small. You know,
Right.
Here in Hawaii, a lot of people talking about so many people coming from China. The percentage is so small, but the numbers are so
Right.
big.
Right.
And just imagine the entire population of the U.S. moving from the rural to urban areas. And as I understand, China's new growth strategy is to move more people into the urban area.
Exactly.
And we can talk about the impact of it at the very end, but you can just imagine, you know, this whole continuing process.
Right.
Yeah.
And so actually what we've seen is that while when Elizabeth Economy wrote her book, industrialization was certainly the main culprit in terms of water pollution. Today, we could say that this, much of the increased water pollution has come from growing domestic sewage, the number of people living in cities. And so from 2001 until 2010, we know that domestic sewage grew from about 22 billion tons of discharge to almost 40 billion tons of discharge. Wow. And that's about an increase of 1.5 billion tons per year. While the annual increase of industrial sewage has only been about a quarter of that. So it's really now this rapid urbanization rather than the industrialization that is a driving factor in a lot of the problems that China is facing. And as you put it, the Chinese government has announced policies that it wants to move even more people into from rural areas into urban areas. And this means, of course, that overall sewage is going to continue to increase. And so total numbers, we've seen 42 billion tons of sewage in 2001 to 61 billion in 2010. But much of that is driven essentially by, again, domestic raw sewage that is being produced now in urban areas.
It seems that everything gets compounded, that you have the continuing growth of industry, and although the rate is not as high as the sewage growth from urban population, but still that is growing, and then you have added on top of it this urban growth, and doesn't look like the cities are quite ready for that rapid growth of population.
I think that no city is really ready for that kind of rapid growth in population. And in fact, some of China's largest cities, Shenzhen is probably the best example, which was in 1978 a small village, has now become the 7th largest city in all of China, is a good example. The people who are dealing with water issues and these sewage issues are highly talented, very capable people, but even under the best of circumstances, struggling with these enormous numbers of new urban residents, it would be difficult for any person in any part of the world to deal with.
I'll talk a little bit about the health effect. You know, I've read and heard about these cancer villages, and some of them were related to water pollution. Any of the particular kind of health issue that you are aware of?
Well, you know, I think when we look at the water pollution issue, we have to keep in mind that quite often the issue is not only limited to the water, but also food supply as well. And so, for example, water feeds crayfish and other forms of marine life. That in turn, of course, is consumed by fish, shrimp, mussels, and other forms of marine life. And that leads, of course, to consumption by human beings and the internalization of high levels of various industrial pollutants. Mercury is often one of the most deadly. And again, we have to keep in mind, of course, that when we look at the history of industrialization in Japan or South Korea or other parts of East Asia, we see similar problems also occurring. It's the scale in China that makes this issue particularly worrisome.
And also, it seems to have prolonged longer than, longer than I expected. I thought 2008 Beijing Olympics would deal with the air pollution problems, would deal with some of the environmental problems, but it apparently has gotten worse, and that's really worrisome. Yeah, so we probably, this is a good time to take a short break, and this is Asia in Review at ThinkTech Hawaii, and I'm your host, Hong Jiang. We've been speaking about China's river and air runs black. And when we come back, we'll have more.
Aloha, I'm Jay Fidel for ThinkTech. For nearly half a century, the Hawaiian Foreign Trade Zone, number 9, has brought the benefits of the Foreign Trade Zone program to Hawaii businesses and entrepreneurs. DBED, the Hawaii Department of Business, Economic Development and Tourism, operates Hawaii's Foreign Trade Zone program. It does so to encourage international business and economic development. The Foreign Trade Zone mission is to increase the amount of international trading activity in Hawaii, thereby providing employment opportunities for the residents of our island state. For more information, see ftz9.org. I'm Jay Fidel of ThinkTech. Mahalo.
Hi, we're back. We're live, coming to you from downtown Honolulu at Pioneer Plaza. And I'm Hong Jiang, and this is Asia in Review at ThinkTech Hawaii. We've been speaking with Dr. James Cook from University of Pittsburgh about China's environmental problems. China's river and air runs black. And so before the break, we were just talking about air pollution and water problems. And one other thing I understand you want to address is the issue of desertification. And can we bring up a map number 5? So desertification, can you tell our viewers just a little bit about what is desertification?
Sure. So desertification is essentially the process by which formerly productive pasture or farmland has become bereft of of much of its moisture and its ability essentially to be used in a productive manner, whether as pasture land or as farmland. Now, the desertification issue in China has been growing quite rapidly. And this is particularly worrisome for China because we have to keep in mind that China's population, 1.2, 1.3 billion, maybe more, but I think 1.3 billion is a fairly strong and reliable number, has very scarce arable land. And essentially, China feeds or attempts to feed 22% of the world's population on 7% of the total arable land. Now, even before the advent of industrialization, China was already struggling to feed its population. Population numbers have increased dramatically since, for example, the 17th century, when China's population was probably around 100 million people. It grew to somewhere around 660, 650 million around at the start of the People's Republic of China in 1949. And as I mentioned earlier, is around 1.3 billion today. So finding ways to feed this enormous population is obviously a major concern for Beijing. Now, what has essentially occurred is that for various reasons, this includes some of the factors that caused the Dust Bowl issues here in the United States in the 1920s, but pasture land, converting it to farmland, and then finding that after several years it was no longer very productive, leaving that fallow and allowing the topsoil to be picked up by the wind is certainly one contributing factor to desertification. During the Chairman Mao era, from 1949 until 1976, we know, of course, that Chairman Mao's dictum, Ren Ding Sheng Tian, or man must conquer heaven,
That's right.
meant that large numbers of peasants were sent out to reconfigure mountainous areas and bring more land under production. And today, much of these mountain lands are now unproductive and are not being used. And so this has severely impacted particularly northwestern China and northern China in general. And we now know that, or estimate that desertification is impacting about 30% of China's total land mass or territory. And particularly worrisome is the growing size and encroachment of the Gobi Desert. The Gobi, of course, stretches from Mongolia down through China's northern province of Inner Mongolia, and it is now growing at a rate of increase in which new territory is being desertified that is equal to the size of the state of Rhode Island every year.
Wow. So would you say much of that expansion of the desert land or Gobi Desert was led by human activities?
Certainly.
Yeah.
Certainly.
So that's just dramatic in terms of
Certainly.
the impact.
And then we also have to keep in mind that, again, the urbanization issue has also had a deep impact on this. As more and more people have moved to cities, we see deeper and deeper well drilling occurring. This has, of course, emptied the aquifers, particularly around Beijing. And they now estimate that the desertification issue is obviously encroaching and approaching upon the capital city. And this, of course, has led Chinese leadership to consider very radical measures, which they already have put into place, the very famous north-south water projects in which they are looking to find ways to bring water from the south to the north.
So all of these problems we talked about, the air pollution, water pollution, now desertification, these were basically problems covering the whole of China. And the larger question here is, why isn't Beijing able to fix it?
Well,
We'll kind of talk about,
right,
yeah.
there, and I think there's a number of answers to this question, and this is a very complicated problem, and I think if we search for simple solutions, we're going to be disappointed. First and foremost, we have to keep in mind that the leadership in Beijing is certainly very, very much aware that these problems are in existence. And they have made the newest 5-year economic plan environmental mitigation as being one of the most important strategies. We also know, of course, that the environment is now considered by the leadership in Beijing as a significant threat to social stability within China.
I guess if people are all affected by all the air pollution, food safety issues, and
Exactly.
protests going on.
Exactly.
Yeah, yeah.
For example, between 2010 and 2011, the number of public protests related to environmental issues increased by 120%.
Wow.
And so this means essentially that the government is well aware that environmental issues are now a threat to its stability, and that environmental issues are costly.
That's right.
We estimate that somewhere between 8 to 12% of China's gross domestic product is eaten up every year by health issues related to environmental pollution. And so when we look at these problems, of course, we have to keep in mind, obviously, that this rapid economic development and rapid urbanization are the two main contributing factors. And we may simply say, well, why can't we just slow that down or
That's
turn
right.
it off, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But it's really not that simple to turn off the switch on economic development. I know certainly many American presidents wish that they could turn that switch on.
That's right.
But I think one way that we have to keep in mind, or part of the problem, is the way in which environmental problems are being managed within China. Essentially, in the United States, environmental protection is the EPA is a national agency that produces policies and helps to enforce them on a nationwide scale. In China, we see that kind of vertical integration that we see here in the U.S. between Washington, state capitals, and county seats does not exist. Instead, what we see is a much more horizontal kind of integration between what are called environmental protection bureaus and county governments. Now, this is not to say that Beijing is not involved in environmental issues. Beijing's National Environmental Protection Bureau is certainly charged today with developing policy goals and to try work closely with industry and other groups in order to protect China's environment. But the enforcement, the enforcement and the administration of the rules and regulations that are provided by Beijing is not in the hands of the national government, but at local and county level politicians. And so essentially what is occurring is that environmental decision makers do not have the administrative power or the financial means to have their laws and rules applied and respected across all of China. And instead, what we see is that county level officials manage environmental protection bureaus and not Beijing. Now, what we also know, of course, is that when this is the case, we have to keep in mind that county level officials are generally promoted, are given good grades, so to speak, based upon economic development within their region. And so, therefore, they have both personal as well as administrative reasons to sometimes ignore or to lightly enforce these environmental protection issues. And so what we've seen occurring is that even though Beijing has mandated major changes in air, water, and desertification problems, quite often at the county level, the most local level, they're not being implemented. Now, sometimes, though, this is often due not to negligence or the greed of local officials, though that some is occurring as well, but also because of finances. Essentially what occurred in the 1990s was the decentralization of much of China's administrative structure. And not only public health issues, but education and environmental enforcement was essentially hoisted onto local governments. And therefore, the local governments were suddenly faced with the fact of how are we going to pay for all of this? How are we going to pay for education? How are we going to pay for public health policies? How are we going to pay for the oversight of the environment? And local leaders had to make difficult decisions. And so sometimes, they chose, I think, education or public health issues over the environment. And this has also made enforcement difficult. So what I think we're seeing here is that there are very big differences between the way environmental issues are overseen here in the United States and in China. And it's a mistake for Americans to assume that the system that we have in operation here in the United States is also being used within China or Japan or South Korea or India. And we need to, I think, begin to study a little bit more what are the issues that China is facing in order to have a better understanding of the problems and solutions.
Exactly. Let's take a short break, and we'll explore more when we come back. And this is Asia in Review at ThinkTech Hawaii. And we've been speaking with Dr. James Cook about China's river and air runs black. And we will be right back.
Aloha, I'm Jay Fidel of ThinkTech. ThinkTech is a 501c3 Hawaii nonprofit corporation. We began ThinkTech in the year 2000. At ThinkTech, we work to raise public awareness about tech, energy diversification, and globalism in Hawaii. We do 20 live stream talk shows every business day, and we do a weekly TV show on OC16. We pay the bills with donations from our supporters. Won't you help us by making a donation? All you need to do is go to our website, thinktechhawaii.com, and click there on the Donate button. We hope that you like what we do and that you will support us and help us continue to do it. Thanks so much for watching and for helping. I'm Jay Fidel of ThinkTech. Mahalo.
Hi, we're back. We're live, and this is Asia in Review at ThinkTech Hawaii. And we've been speaking about China's environment, China's river and air runs black. So Dr. Cook, just right before the break, you were talking about how we have to understand how the systems work in China in order to understand the problems in China, environmental problems. And so my understanding is, from what you said, the Environmental Bureau really don't have a lot of power at the local level to reinforce some of these policies. And the local economy was taken over by the local government, and the government officials were making decisions based on what their needs are, what their pressures were, economic pressure because of decentralization, and also the pressure in terms of a political performance that they are going to be judged by the economic output rather than environmental issues.
Correct.
And one thing, though, in China, oftentimes the local people, as you said correctly, the local people are not necessarily just the bad guys. They were under a lot of pressure, but they were always tend to be painted as the problem.
Correct.
It's the local problem. The central government has great policies. The local people were not implementing it. But what's interesting, I think the center, Beijing, cannot avoid responsibilities here.
Correct.
And the reason being, why is it that the local government leaders are continuing to be judged by their economic performance and not punished by all these environmental problems and serious pollution issues. And so in a way that the central government is hoping maybe to move into a direction, but really isn't effective in implementing its policies, right? Is that a fair assessment?
I think, yes. I think we have to keep in mind, obviously, that Beijing is essentially dictating these various economic plans that China follows in its on its 5-year cycles in terms of economic development. And certainly in the earliest economic plans over the past several decades, environmental considerations were not part of did not receive much attention. Now, I think what will be interesting is to see how local governments are going to be reacting to the newest 5-year economic plan, where environmental considerations are given a much higher consideration than we've seen previously. And this includes demands that more funds be used or be implemented into environmental mitigation strategies. I think the bigger question here, however, is the question of whether or not Beijing can find a sustainable way, obviously, of its current pace of urban development and growth. And obviously the reliance on automobiles, carbon fuels, and gasoline to move people around these major cities is leading to situations now which are essentially intolerable. And some cities, Shanghai, for example, has probably done a much better job than Beijing in terms of controlling automobile growth. But ultimately, Beijing as the national government is going to have to step in and do a much better job of not only dictating policy, but also providing the funding to allow these measures not only to occur, but to be enforced effectively. And that can mean not only funding for increased vigilance and testing, but also larger administrative penalties for the largest corporate polluters within China. And we have to also keep in mind, however, that one of the biggest polluters, of course, is the housing and construction industry. And a lot of people in China at all levels of life are making a lot of money off of that, and it's going to be difficult to lay off that.
And earlier in Asia in Review, we actually had a show to talk about China's housing bubble, the urban growth issue, the housing bubble, and it's a big monster there, and it seems to be continuing and continue to be promoted by the government. So we can really see the challenges there. And earlier on, it's an interesting figure you gave: 8 to 12% of the growth, economic growth, is consumed by environmental pollution problems.
Correct.
And now we have a growth rate in China less than 8 to 10 and 12. So in actuality, China isn't growing that fast. And there are so much of hidden cost involved here, especially the environment. So the question is China polluting itself out of the economy?
Well, I think it has not reached that point yet, but it's getting dangerously close. And we've seen other cases, particularly the problems that Japan faced, for example, in the 1950s and the 1960s, where similar issues were faced. And we have to keep in mind that Tokyo Bay at one time was the most polluted body of water in the world, and today it is much more pristine than it has been in decades. And so we have seen parts of the globe be able to recover from these environmental disasters, but I think ultimately what we also have to keep in mind is that man must live within nature rather than man must conquer heaven. And as long as China continues to follow this path of environmental, of breakneck environmental development, rapid urbanization, and a lack of enforcement at the local level, then these problems are certainly going to continue.
It's definitely something we need to, so many people in the world are paying attention to because China is an important part of the world. And
well, it's also now impacting people obviously in Japan and in South Korea.
And in Hawaii here.
And in Hawaii.
That's
and,
right.
I've read figures where they now estimate that on some days, 30% of the particulate matter in Los Angeles comes from China.
Wow. So it's definitely something we need to continue to learn about. And
Right.
Thank you so much, Dr. Cook, for
My
educating
pleasure.
us.
Thank you so much.
And this is Asia in Review. I'm Hong Jiang. I'm your host. And we've been talking with Dr. James Cook about China's environment, China's river and air runs black. And thank you so much for joining us. And I want to thank our production manager, Ian Davison, communications director, Chrissy Golfigan, and our producer, Jay Fidel, and you for tuning in. I'm Hong Jiang at Asia in Review at ThinkTech Hawaii, and thank you. Goodbye.